Burning Man is this intentional, wonderful, vibrant community that takes place for 1 week a year out in the desert of Nevada. 60,000 people were there approximately this past year. And you see here, this is where the people camp, all 60,000 people. And there are these small communities that form called theme camps. And I had the privilege with some dear friends of co-creating, nourishing, and bringing one of these communities to fruition over almost 15 years. So I'm going to take you on a journey of that community. But I'm also going to take you on a journey of building culture. Because when you're building an organization, and when you're thinking about an organization, could be a business, a nonprofit, a partnership, any sort of entity, it's really the culture that enables the long-term growth of that organization, the sustainability of that organization, and then ultimately the transition of that organization. So I'm going to take you on this journey of this entity, this community called Hippocampus that we built, and hopefully call out some cultural landmarks that gave us the guiding principles that enabled us to build this sustainable community, and then you'll see ultimately transition it. So the first year we journeyed out to the desert. There were 8 of us, 4 people from San Francisco and 4 people from New York. And we implemented this sort of rule we called no drama. This became the very first cultural marker of our community. And no drama really meant, for us, it meant to set aside your personal agenda. And for us, that was very important because among the 8 was my wife and an ex-girlfriend. And neither of them believed that I could actually pull off this, bringing us all out to the desert and, successfully getting us through that week of the event. So we implemented this idea of no drama. The next year, you can see we start to grow a little bit more. We added 22 people. We're from about 4 different cities now. We started doing some art projects, and we introduced this cultural norm called radical accountability. Because when you're building an organization and the organization is growing, you inherently have to think about, well, who's coming into this entity? Who are the new people? What's the nature of that, and how is that going to change the organization? So the idea of radical accountability was the idea of each person was accountable for every new person they brought into that entity and that organization. So again, as you're building a business, you're building a nonprofit, you're building a community organization, as you're growing it, think about that accountability notion and bake that into your culture. The third year, you can see here, we started to get a little more sophisticated with our art projects. We've actually had 1 marriage as a result of our community, 2 kids, and I actually see 2 kids in the audience right now, which is great. I think the children were about this infant age when they came that year. We had to start thinking about identity. We're now up to 65 people have rotated through camp. This year, we had, a large group in camp. And you have to start thinking about identity at this point when you reach critical mass numbers. So we came up with this idea of a name for the group, Hippocampus, which afterwards I'll tell you the story of that name because it's a very fascinating name. But hippocampus is actually the part of the brain. It's Latin for seahorse, but it's also the part of the brain responsibility for myth-making, spirituality, some long-term memory management. And we would often have neuroscientists come visit us and actually tell us exactly what it was about. But the idea of identity. So again, when you're thinking about your organization and your culture, think about the identity. And a name is a big part of that. 2003, you can see we start to get basically exponential growth at this point. We're now up to, 15 states. We're adding people from around the world. We introduced this idea of sexy and helpful. Once you have a name, once you have an identity, you start to have a need for milestones for people in the community. And I want to just extrapolate and riff on sexy and helpful for a minute. Because the word sexy in particular is a bit of a weird word to think about. Well, everyone in your community has to be sexy? Like, what does that really mean? And, sexy has nothing to do with what you look like in a bikini, what you look like when you dance, what you look like in your best moment. Sexy is about being your most vulnerable and open self. And that's a core value to our community. And, the idea of helpful isn't necessarily about, well, can you use a screw gun on a 9-foot ladder? Or can you tie a sheepshank knot to shorten 2 ropes? Helpful is about being the one with sunscreen. Or being the one to sort of hug someone when they really need it. So you take those 2 cultural identifiers and you bake them into your larger culture. And it becomes something that's a norm of your community that enables the sustainability of the community. So for us, the idea of sexy and helpful, not only is it a great thing that we tried to trademark, but we couldn't, but it's just, it's just a great, phraseology. The next year we move into really a quantum year for us. This was the first year we did a large-scale art project at Burning Man. We took a barn from Ohio that a friend of ours had painted, and we disassembled that barn, and we transported that out to Burning Man, rebuilt it, and it weighed about 6 to 8 tons by the time it was done, took 3 24-foot trucks, took 2 weeks to build out there. It was just one of these insane projects. And for us, culturally, what that enabled was this idea of 2 things. One, a surface area for participation. And what we mean by that is as your community, your entity, your business, whatever it is you're thinking about grows, you need to consciously create a way for everyone to participate. You need to create a very broad surface area for participation. So we built this giant structure, and we had people that knew how to use power tools. We had engineers. We had people that knew safety. When we burned it, we had people that knew fire. But how do you think about getting everyone able to participate in a project like this? And that became a cultural norm for us that I think is highly relevant to any organization as it grows. And you can see here, this year was the first year we faced a death. A dear friend of ours, we came back from Burning Man that year, and she unfortunately took her life. And as a community, we now had the ability to address that and face that and support each other. So we're maturing as an entity with the advent of this culture we've created. We're now into 2005. We've got 8 kids, 5 unions. We're having, about 80 people in the group this year. We've rotated 200 people. We're pretty much covering off on all the major continents at this point. We're doing art cars, which are just fascinating, difficult projects to do. But this was the year we really challenged the community to think about the other 51 weeks a year. Burning Man is an event, takes place in Nevada, as I said, but it only lasts a week. But how do you take that culture, how do you take that momentum and that connection, particularly when you're dealing with a geographically dispersed community, and make that a lasting thing for the entire year? And that's a metaphor. It's when you're thinking about your own entity that you're driving or you're creating, how do you extend the mission of that beyond, we're talking about time and space, but maybe there's another dimension you're thinking about. So this was the year we came back from Burning Man and Katrina had hit New Orleans. We thought, we're this incredibly powerful, intentional community. What can we do? We had a gigantic fundraiser where we brought this crazy art car. Our sister communities in other cities had other fundraisers. And we raised nearly $25,000. And we actually donated an RV to some Katrina survivors. It became a mobile veterinary hospital, which is a whole other crazy story, which, I would love to tell another time. But the notion is that we as a community, embrace this idea of continuing the momentum beyond our original mission and our original intention. This was also the first year we implemented this thing called a love beam, which also is connected to the 51 weeks a year. That's the idea of putting our love and our connection and our ability to affect change in the world out again over the other 51 weeks. So we get into 2006, we continue to grow. We start doing this crazy French cafe in the middle of the desert where we're serving, 400 people a day, 25 gallons of coffee. We're doing French music, again, in the middle of the desert, very surreal experience. Our identity is growing. We have 9 kids that pass through the camp. We come up with this cultural idea of there's no perfect way. And this is kind of connected to surface area for participation. But the idea being, when you tell someone, no, there is one right way to do that, you're by definition excluding them from participating in your community, in your organization, or your entity. So we really stretch this definition of there's no perfect way. If you want to string those lights that way, that's awesome. If you want to, present yourself that way, that is awesome. You have to be a little careful with this because when you're tying knots for scaffolding or, dealing with safety issues, there might be a perfect way for that. But yeah, generally speaking, there truly is no perfect way to do a job. And that's a norm and a meme and a cultural identifier of our group. We're now into 2007. The growth is amazing. We're all over the world. We've got someone from Hawaii, Colombia, Mexico, India, Australia, New Zealand. The Antipodeans are covered. This year was the year we implemented this idea of shared meals and shared experiences. And as a culture, we started to grow. We're really big now. and we're doing great things in the world, but there was a little loss of sort of that identity. So we really focused on this idea of what are the rituals we can create to bring us back together. And we had this idea of shared meals. And you might be thinking, well, you haven't been sharing meals all along, what's going on? But we're a very freedom-oriented culture, and we wanted people to have the opportunity to experience the event or their lives the way they want to. But it's critical as your entity grows that you consciously create these shared experiences. And we chose to do that around meals and has become a hallmark of our culture. We move into 2008. Funny thing here, the picture here you see a submarine rising out of frozen lake. You might be thinking, what is that doing? I thought this was an art festival in the desert. This is another manifestation of the other 51 weeks. Our group in Minneapolis was invited to participate in this incredible art project to build art on frozen lakes in Minneapolis. And what we did was we were able to take our culture out to that environment. And this desire to just do art and participate and affect change in the community really became a manifestation on a frozen lake in Minnesota. And this year, our cultural norm, if you will, or our cultural marker was this idea of everyone has a unique gift. Kind of connected to No Perfect Way, but even a little more profound when you think about it. I don't care if you're the newest member of the community, you're the jaded veteran, if you're, you don't know how to use a power tool, or you don't know how to maybe, be quote unquote sexy, whatever it is, you have a gift, and it's actually the leadership's responsibility to find that gift, help you articulate it, and then have it manifested within the community. So again, thinking about any organization and any entity you work with, you have to build that in. So now, 2009, it's gigantic. We're 350 people have rotated through. We're becoming this large entity with this very powerful identity. I'm actually live in Seattle. I walk around Seattle. People are like, oh, you're Harley of Hippocampus. It's really weird. I don't like that. And it's this idea of ego. And I think a lot of people in the community were starting to experience this ego attachment to the group, which is very unhealthy. It undermines the long-term sustainability and the ability to transition the group over time when ego becomes wrapped up into the entity. So this year we really focused on this idea of unwinding your ego, detaching your ego, your individual identity, your individual connection to the larger collective. And it was actually perfect timing because later that year on Valentine's Day, my daughter Eden Peach was born. Very special thing. And that actually necessitated a physical transition of this community. I no longer could sacrifice 4 months in the summer and pretty much turn off all my jobs and everything I was doing and, nourish this Burning Man community. And it was time to actually transition and pass the baton. And if you read the management literature, if you read any thinking about organizational dynamics, it's fairly universal that transitioning a personality-led organization is one of the most difficult things you can do. And most often, they fail. And we all can, look at those in our personal lives or in the business world or, the nonprofit world. We all know personality-led organizations that when that generation passes it on, maybe it will live for a year or two, but something is lost. And I'm proud to say, beyond my wildest expectations, that Hippocampus, this intentional community that we all co-created, thrived. It's now 2012. We had an incredibly fun year at Burning Man this year. I transitioned the leadership the first year to 6 individuals, and it was the running joke that it took 6 people to do the job of 1, but, it actually did. But we have this giant bus now. We do these huge projects. We do this French cafe out. We do it out, in the open space. We do it back in our camp space. The logistics are astounding, but this amazing group of people pulls it off. But they also pull off 51 weeks a year. You see down here, one of our precious members of our community, David Anderson, has been with us since pretty much day 0. He has Lou Gehrig's disease, and he is facing an incredible life situation. It's incredibly hard to describe. And the way the community is rallying behind him and supporting him and his family is just testimony to the strength of the culture of the community. It's astounding to watch. And the things that we do, it's mind-blowing every day. And the transition, I no longer play a role. I kind of secretly look at the leader's email list, and every once in a while I'm like, you guys are doing it wrong. But at the end of the day, it's their entity. And we thought about blowing the whole thing up too. There was part of me that said, look, you can't transition this kind of organization. Just burn the sign, get rid of the identity, start over. But we chose not to do that, and it was the right thing to do. And I think it was the right thing to do because of the strength of the culture that we had built. We had walked through, these ideas. And these are just words we chose, but I do believe there's universal truths in here for any organization. Whether it's, no drama. How do you implement that in your 2-person entity, in your 1,000-person entity, in your 100,000-person entity? The other 51 weeks a year, that's a time continuum. How do you think about that differently? But at the end of the day, these all fall apart. Or they all go away. There really is, you choose the words, you choose the markers you want, and what you're left with is the culture. And culture is what supports and transcends everything, and culture is the DNA of every organization. It's what enabled this community to transition incredibly successfully, and I passionately believe it's what will enable any entity to transition successfully and pass the baton from generation to generation. This has been an incredible privilege, and I just am so happy to have shared these lessons with you all today. Thank you very much.